Okay, well, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Good evening. My name is Jessica Laganowski. I am the Public Services Librarian with the Adams County Library System, and I want to thank you so much for attending tonight's program, Panic and Perseverance, Virtual Author Presentation. So before I turn over the program to our speaker tonight, Sarah Bigham, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Everyone enter tonight's program on mute. You will notice your microphone and your camera, if you have one, have been muted. However, please feel free to ask questions and make comments throughout the program using the chat feature. For most of you, the chat feature is going to be on the bottom of your screen. For some of you, it's actually going to be at the top of your screen. The chat feature is set up to default to only send comments and questions to the panelists, which is myself and Sarah. I will monitor the chat box throughout the program and let Sarah know the comments and questions that are left at the end of her presentation. This program is being recorded and will appear on the Adams County Library System's YouTube channel in the next few days. If you would like to see a variety of content, or if you would like to see the variety of content available on the Library System's YouTube channel, visit the Adams County Library System at www.adamslibrary.org and click on the link to the YouTube channel about halfway down the screen. Content is added regularly, so be sure to subscribe to find the latest videos and resources made available on the channel. Thank you for tonight's program to our sponsors, James and Kathy Gardner and WellSpan Health. And so now I'd like to introduce Sarah. Sarah was born and raised in Gettysburg and now lives in Frederick, Maryland, where she is a professor in the Department of Social Sciences and Education at Frederick Community College. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's degree in educational psychology, and a doctorate in curriculum and teaching. Sarah turned to creative endeavors in 2015 when she developed strange health symptoms and a growing list of medical diagnoses. Chronic invisible illness is a daily challenge, but has prepared her well for the pandemic. Sarah's paintings have been featured in literary magazines and on display in art exhibits. Her poems, essays, and short stories have been published in a wide array of journals, and she has been nominated for Pushcart as well as Best at the Net awards. Sarah's first book, Kind Chemist Wife, Musings at 3 a.m., was released this year. And just to let you guys know too, the Adams County Library System is working on getting a copy of the book in our collection. You know, COVID has kind of made things a little bit difficult for, for a lot of reasons. So be sure to check soon. We'll have that in our collection. And so without further ado, I'd like to welcome Sarah Bigham.
Thank you so much, Jessica. It's great to be here, and thank you to everyone for joining this evening. As Jessica mentioned, you are muted and your cameras are off. So as I'm talking, I know that people are out there, but I can't see you. So if you have anything that you want to contribute or a question to ask, I'm happy to answer them. Feel free to put that in the chat box. So I want to thank, first of all, Jessica for allowing me to be a speaker today and the Adams County Public Library. And I also want to thank all of you who are here. I know that right now, even though there's a pandemic happening, we have very, very crowded calendars and schedules. And the last thing that anybody probably needs is to spend more time on a screen. So I'm really honored that you decided to spend some time tonight here with me and the library, and I'm looking forward to talking with you. I also want to thank my wife, Susan, who is in the background. She's currently sitting in the kitchen, which is right next to where I am. She is monitoring the cats. Jessica and I were talking before the program started that for those of you who have cats, you've probably experienced this. They sleep 23 hours a day, seemingly, and then the one time you need them to be quiet, they are up doing all sorts of things. So you might hear them in the background, but hopefully not. I am a big fan of the Adams County Library. I grew up in Gettysburg, as Jessica mentioned, and I spent many, many hours in the library. My mom took us there many times. And now this is the old location on High Street. At the time, the current library location in Gettysburg was the post office. So I spent hours there. Doris, the children's librarian, was a regular feature in my childhood, and I loved wandering around the stacks and finding new treasures to read. Books then were my friends. They've always been my friends. I've found a lot of solace in books and never quite thought that I'd write one, but here we are. And I look forward to sharing that with you. I have an ongoing love of libraries and am currently a member of the American Library Association. I'm not a librarian, but I love libraries, and I encourage you to look at the ALA. They offer a lot of great programming throughout the year, a lot of interesting information. So the title of the program today is Panic and Perseverance, and both of these are items that featured pretty heavily and still do in my life. And I know that they are things that a lot of people now in a pandemic are also dealing with, panic and perseverance. And tonight I'm going to talk about my book, give you a few excerpts from that, and then also talk about coping. And perhaps some of the ideas I have might generate some of your own ideas, because we all need ways to cope during the pandemic that never seems to end. So this is what my book looks like. It's called Kind Chemist Wife, Musings at 3 a.m. and the front cover is part of one of my watercolor paintings. If you're interested in the book, as Jessica mentioned, there is a copy that the Gettysburg branch has or will soon have. And you can also purchase it online on Amazon Bookshop, which is a relatively new online site for purchasing books, and Barnes & Noble all carry it. So Jessica, thank you for the introduction. You provided a great overview of me and what I do. When I was reflecting on my background and what to share tonight, it occurred to me that pretty much my life has been shaped by education and schools. So those are the main features in my life. I grew up in Gettysburg. My siblings and I were walkers to Eisenhower Elementary, which is no longer a school, sadly. Then I went on to Gettysburg Junior High, and that building that I was in has been now torn down. There's a new junior high. And I also attended the senior high school, which I believe is now an elementary school. So not the big one on Route 50 or Harrisburg Road, but the old one. I then went to college in Virginia, graduate school in New York, and moved here to Maryland, where I've been in Frederick for about 20 years. So lots of crossing of the Mason-Dixon line throughout my time. And I'm a professor at FCC, Frederick Community College, and it's a job that I really, really love. I teach classes that are called Human Growth and Development, Schools and Society, Educational Psychology, Career Communications. And it's a job that I really, really love. I work reduced hours now because of my medical accommodations, but I truly feel like my job has been a sustaining force for me during chronic illness. And for anybody out there who has chronic illness, I'm sure you've found the same thing, that there are things that you hang on to that keep you going. And one of the things I really love about a community college is that it's open to everybody and all age ranges. So we have a child care center on campus, for instance, so there are babies, there are pre and preschool options there as well. There are before and after school care for people in elementary school. We have high schoolers who take classes with us. We have college classes. There are community enrichment classes, and there's even the Institute for Learning and Retirement for people who are older. And I just love the fact that I get to work somewhere where everybody gets to learn new things all the time, which is great. So why did I write a book? I read a lot of them. I never thought I would write one, but I wrote a book because I got sick. That's the quick answer. It's because I got sick. About 6 years ago, I started developing a series of very strange and painful medical symptoms, and I spiraled downhill pretty quickly. I kept getting more and more symptoms and becoming sicker and sicker, and it was, I definitely lived with a sense of panic. It was terrifying when you don't know what's happening to you and it keeps happening and you see doctor after doctor after doctor and no one can make sense of you. It's really challenging. And my whole life changed. My wife and I loved to travel and go places, and I couldn't travel anymore. I couldn't sit for long enough to even get to the airport, let alone get on an airplane and go anywhere, or drive anywhere long distance. It impacted my work. It impacted what I do in our so-called free time. It really turned my life completely upside down. And I essentially turned to creativity to try and save myself. And that worked out well. So Jessica mentioned some of the art. Two of my abstract, as you can tell, I do abstracts. Abstract watercolors are behind me, and I need to thank my mother, who is joining us this evening. Hi, Mom. She is the person who finds the frames and assembles everything, and has helped me with shows. And I've really benefited from being part of the world of arts, even though I wasn't specifically trained in that. It was a really nice place to spend some time and have a diversion and something that I could do without having to leave my house. I also returned to writing. I loved creative writing when I was a student in the K-12 system. I really loved it, but stopped after high school and didn't return until I was in my 40s and when I got sick. And now I do poems and essays and short stories, and have had over 150 pieces published. And I had no idea what I was doing when I first started sending things out. And I kind of taught myself the process, and now I have a book. So the title of it, people have asked, Kind Chemist Wife. So I should be very clear and tell you that the Kind Chemist Wife does not refer to me. I am not a chemist. My wife, Susan, is a chemist. She's an organic chemist, and she is the kind person referred to here. And Musings at 3 a.m., that refers to the fact that I was doing a lot of things in the middle of the night, or what other people would refer to as the middle of the night. For me, that's oftentimes my most energetic time. Susan is an early to bed person. She is usually asleep by 9:15 at the latest. And when I was at my worst in terms of the pain flares, I would quite literally wander the house. And it was too painful to sit. It was too painful to lie down unless I knew I could immediately fall asleep because I was utterly exhausted. So I would pretty much wander the house with the cats trailing after me and think about a lot of things. So that's where the title comes from. And I want to share a brief essay with you that relates to Gettysburg. So the first thing I'm going to share is an essay called Wild Bill. Obtaining a driver's license in my hometown required a classroom course followed by a practical component called, helpfully, Behind the Wheel. After acing some true-false quizzes and viewing safety films, I passed the written permit test without issue. Then I met Wild Bill. Wild Bill helped hundreds of teenagers learn to drive, and I fear I may have been his most challenging charge. On my first day, I hit the curb and forgot to put the car in park before I got out. He just shook his head. While mastering country roads, Wild Bill told me to accelerate. I informed him that I wasn't able to successfully steer beyond 30 miles per hour, but he kept urging me on. We soon approached a hill and the car practically came to a standstill halfway up. Wild Bill yelled, "Floor it, Bigham," and I did, right into a ditch at the side of the road. More head shaking. Parallel parking also proved challenging, as did operating the windshield wipers. Quiet head shaking. Wild Bill harbored hopes I would pass the driving test before the school took possession of the brand new driver's education vehicle. Instead, it returned to the school with damage to a side mirror. To my credit, I told Wild Bill quite specifically that turning into alleys was not my forte. I did pass the driver's test, finally. This warranted a grin, and on the same night backed into a fence post. My dad is on here. He remembers that night. Wild Bill is gone now, free at last to cruise the roadways alone in his own vehicle. I think of him when I have mistakenly driven down one-way streets in the wrong direction, parked with wheels atop a curb, or struggled to operate my car's air conditioning. I shake my head and give a hint of a smile. And my interaction with him, first of all, I don't think that we can ever adequately compensate people who teach classes like driver's ed. And I think of Wild Bill when I'm working with my students and try to remember that patience is really the key. And you always have to meet students where they are and work with them in a kind and in as kind a way as possible. So let's talk a little bit about chronic illness. And I'm interested if anybody on here has someone, either you or someone in your family, someone you live with, a friend. Does anybody have someone that in your life who lives with chronic illness? And if so, if you can put in the chat what it is that person is living with. Perhaps people have arthritis or other kinds of things. I'm interested in what it is that you all are living with, or know what people are living with. And I know there's danger in asking questions. I teach right now, all of my classes are virtual or online. And I know that asking questions into the void is sometimes a challenge, because you never know if anybody is going to respond. And I don't see that any, oh, there are some. All right, arthritis runs in the family. Now here is one that I have not heard of. Pemphigus vulgaris. I have no idea what that is. Learning things all of the time. Thyroid and migraine. Okay, yes. So there are many, many things out there, and obviously more to learn about. And for those people who live with this, chronic illness can be really, really hard. Especially if you have chronic pain with any of that, you know how terribly behind we are as a society in understanding not only pain, but how to treat it. Oh, hi, Deirdre. I see Deirdre's here. Oh, yes. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, Chiari malformation, congestive heart failure, chronic pain. Yes, so many things that millions and millions of us are dealing with. And I feel like we don't necessarily talk about it as much as we should as a society. And that is part of the reason that I wrote the book, because living with chronic illness, essentially it sucks. There's no other way around it. It is not a fun thing to have to live with. And many of these illnesses or conditions are invisible. So for those of you who have experienced this, if you have a, quote, invisible illness, people will walk up to you and say, oh, you know, you look great, Sarah. Oh, you look great. You must be feeling better. And you're already exhausted, and then hearing that, and I know people mean well, I know that they are really trying to be helpful, but hearing things like that, it's exhausting. Because yes, I know I don't look sick, but that doesn't mean that every fiber of my being isn't aching right now. So living with chronic illness is hard. I now have a list of 20-some diagnoses. It's long and ridiculous. Some of the things that I have, one of them is fibromyalgia, and a lot of people have heard of that. So, and some of you out there may know a loved one or you yourself are dealing with it. For me, the way that fibro manifests is it makes me tired and very achy. Parts of your body that you didn't think even had nerves ache. And I know there are people who are very, very incapacitated because of it. I also have something called interstitial cystitis, which is something a lot of people have not heard of. And interstitial cystitis is essentially feels like having a terrible UTI, bladder infection, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 6 years, or however long you happen to have had it. Prevention Magazine put out a ranking of the worst pains that people can have, and interstitial cystitis came in at number 3 above cancer pain, above kidney stones, above a variety of other things. So essentially it's awful. Now, what we're learning is that some of these diagnoses that I have are probably wrong because they're probably actually something else. So my latest specialist is an allergist who treats people who have mast cell syndromes. And that is apparently something I have. And I'm being treated for that. And I'm feeling better than I have in a long time, which is wonderful. So we're thinking that maybe I don't have 20-some different things, but instead I have a mast cell disorder and maybe a couple of other things. So one of the reasons that I love my specialist is that he takes me seriously. Another reason I love him is that he trained with Dr. Fauci years ago. And here in our household, we celebrate science and we love Dr. Fauci. My wife has a button that says Fauci for president. So he's been wonderful. And I'm very, very grateful to now have some treatments, but what they do is they help manage my symptoms. And I'm very grateful for that, but also for those of us who live with chronic illness, there's the challenge of you're never going to be cured. And people who don't live with chronic illness are oftentimes waiting for you to say, oh, yeah, I'm all better now, or when will your treatments be successful? And the answer is that it's with you for life. And that's a really hard thing to accept. I know for me, that was very difficult. And in speaking to others, I know it's been a challenge for other people as well. You have to find positivity for yourself. You have to find every day, you have to talk positively to yourself and find reasons to keep moving forward. And some days that's easier than others. After I wrote the book, or as I was writing the book and after I wrote it, I've heard from a lot of people who have chronic illnesses or complicated diagnoses or strange medical symptoms. And primarily they are women, not all, but primarily. And a lot of women have dealt with medical gaslighting and the fact that maybe your medical care providers or even your family and friends have suggested that maybe the pain isn't actually that bad. Maybe it's a psychiatric issue instead. And for those of you out there who don't yet have a diagnosis or you're still struggling with what it is that might be going wrong, I want you to know that I believe you and I believe your experience of pain, and you should keep going until you find somebody who believes in you and can help you find treatment. I think that there are a lot of injustices done to people, especially women, who live with these strange kinds of symptoms and less understood issues. People who have read the book, who know me, have said a variety of times that they don't necessarily want to say that they liked the book. They're glad they read it, they thought the writing was good, etc. But they're hesitant to say that they liked it because the parts about health and the parts about pain were so difficult for them to read. And it's hard to like that. I'm glad that I put those things in the book because I feel like people need to know them. And quite honestly, as somebody who lives with these conditions, I will say that it is much harder to live with the conditions than it is to read about them. But that's just my opinion. I didn't want people to feel alone. And when I first got sick, I felt very, very lonely. And that was in spite of the fact of having a wonderful, probably the best spouse on the planet, in spite of having her, in spite of having wonderful family members who drove me to appointments and took me to the grocery store and did everything for me. Wonderful family, wonderful colleagues who would do anything for me. I mean, I've lost count of how many people at my workplace have given me rides various times when I was just not up to driving. And despite all of that, it can be really lonely to feel like you're the only person who has this strange compilation of symptoms. And I didn't want people to feel alone. I wanted other people who were wandering at 2 or 3 in the morning to be able to see that they were not alone. Here is an excerpt from the book. It's an essay related to medical care and when you have to go get blood work done, which for me is something that I dread. It's called Drilling for Oil. I have a habit of admiring other people's veins, snake-sized, sinewy, accessible veins. The veins I did not inherit, the veins I wish I had. There is a slight intake of breath when I enter, a quick darting of the eyes to a coworker, a sudden need to use the restroom. The short one tells me I don't drink enough water. Not true. She misses twice, and thus I am passed to contestant number 2. The dark-haired one tells me she is a vein whisperer, and there will be no trouble in her bloodletting alcove. She sticks me 4 times without success. The gray-haired man calls himself Hacksaw Harry to lighten the mood, not realizing apparently how close he is to the truth. There is talk behind the curtains of sending me to the hospital so blood can be drawn from my neck. Perhaps somewhere near my throat exists a fat pipeline of platelets. One last attempt is tried, a paired effort with the short one wielding a needle and the dark-haired one tugging on my arm like a pump jack as I lean towards the floor and beg the vein on my hand to yield enough. Just for today. Just for today. Only 4 vials this time. The vein hesitantly complies, tired of being the one always selected after an exhaustive search elsewhere in places with fewer nerve endings. The stream is slow, the oil well is tired. So much for the cavernous passageways of bodily fluids I tried to visualize in my mind. I leave with multiple gauze pads attached to my hands and arms with paper tape, a wounded prize fighter heading home after a bout, a bull rider icing an aching back before the next rodeo. I hear the high fives and the thank gods right before the front door clicks shut behind me. I cry in my car. It is hard not to be wanted in a place I pay to frequent, to be the one they hope to never see, to be the day ruiner, the I'll be late for my nail appointment cause, the one whose body is ill-equipped for its present needs. In my last life, I must have fed multitudes, but not myself. Now my body keeps its oil to itself. I've talked to some other people who also deal with chronic illness who find that these so-called routine procedures like going to have your blood drawn can be sometimes the most anxiety producing. And that's often because you're a hard stick or something traumatic has happened to you there. I know that I am very glad that I do not have regular appointments at the blood draw place any longer. That is a relief. I felt like I lived there for a while. And one of the things that often happens to people with chronic pain is that you develop something called allodynia, or your central nervous system is really ramped up. So your pain tolerance changes, and something that other people would perceive as being sort of negligible pain feels to you as being really, really intense pain. And that seems just horribly unfair after everything else one has to go through. So with blood draws, for instance, I find them very, very, very painful, especially because they have to take them out of my hand. Someday we're going to figure out a way to have that happen in a different way. Someday. All right, let's talk about how to reduce panic and persevere based on the title of the program today. And I am not going to pretend to have all of the answers. There are days that I struggle. But I hope that the suggestions that I share today might spark some ideas for you. Those of you who are working on the front lines, I salute you. If you are a frontline worker, we owe you a lot. And for those of you out there who are teaching any age, or if you are supervising children who are learning virtually, you can never be repaid for what you are doing right now. The workload is outrageous. The expectations are just untenable. And this is the hardest. I've been in higher ed a long time, in education in general for a long time. This is the hardest semester I've ever had. Everybody I talk to is exhausted and near their breaking point, and we all need to find ways to cope. So hopefully some of these ideas will be helpful. So five main things that I'll share with you. The first one is connecting with people. And I know that for those of us who are currently working in the field of educating college students, we are concerned about the isolation that some students are feeling, where they are learning virtually, not having connections with other people, and perhaps don't even see other faces on the screen other than the instructor who's teaching. So connections are really, really important. And one of the things that has helped sustain me is something that I'll refer to as deck visits. We have a deck at the back of our house, and I never thought it would get this much use. But my wife is really wonderful about saying, how about if we schedule a deck visit this week? And we'll have one person or two people who live together in a pod come over, and we'll sit on the deck with socially distanced, masked, etc. And it's just so nice to be able to talk to people in person. Obviously, it's wonderful to have virtual opportunities as well, but being able to see a real person in the flesh is fantastic. And I encourage you to do that. I also encourage you to, I still have an address book. I know that most everybody else has everything in their phones, but I still have a paper address book. And I would encourage you to, whether you have a phone, an address book, whatever it is, open that up and call some of your old friends. Messaging and texting, that's also very nice, but being able to have an actual full-on conversation with somebody is really restorative. And I bet those people you haven't talked to in a long time would be really happy to hear from you. It's also nice to be able to talk to people who aren't in the same exact area where you are. I have a friend named Bob who turns 90 today, actually. It's his birthday. He turns 90 and he lives on the West Coast. And I enjoy talking with him, finding out what he's up to. And we have here also a plan where once a week I FaceTime with my nieces in Pittsburgh, and we call it book club. And oftentimes that mainly involves talking about cats, because one of my nieces loves cats, or they will read a chapter or a story of a book to me. But it's a great way to stay connected. I also talk to my father-in-law. I have Thursdays with Joe. He lives in Florida, and I talk to him on Thursdays, and that's wonderful. I enjoy being able to catch up with him and seeing what he's up to. And I probably talk to somebody in my original nuclear family at least once a day. My parents, my siblings, and even if it's just a quick chat, it's nice to be able to catch up with people. And if you are somebody who lives with one of these conditions that we were talking about in the chat, or chronic illness, it's also really, really nice to be able to have somebody who understands. I have an aunt who is a night owl like myself, and I can talk to her at midnight, and she has also dealt with more than her fair share of medical issues, and we will just exchange stories about whatever the most ridiculous medical thing is that's happened to us and laugh about it at 12:30 at night. And that's really great. I also wanted to mention my friend Victoria, a great friend of mine who unfortunately passed away this week from cancer. And I am so glad that she and I kept in close touch, and especially as she was going through her cancer treatments. She was somebody who understood the indignity of some of the things that you go through, especially if you have pain in your pelvis. Nobody wants to talk about that. And just the exhaustion of all of that. It was really nice to have somebody who just understood, even without the words. I have another excerpt that I wanted to share with you, and this is just a part of an essay called When They Laugh. And this is a part of the book that I have heard from a variety of people with chronic pain that they have said, you really get it. You really get it. And more people need to know about this. So this is called When They Laugh. I wish a support group existed for people like me, held in a location down the block. Car travel makes me flare. With squishy furniture, the only kind I can sit on comfortably, and even then for a maximum of 30 minutes. Multiple bathrooms. I have interstitial cystitis, among a host of other things, and those of us with this condition always feel like we have to pee. And maybe donuts, although only a few of us could eat them given the number of special diets chronic pain patients are advised to follow. I would like to be surrounded by others with unrelenting pain, to feel connected to a fellowship of sufferers whose daily victories of staying alive and getting out of bed are remarkable accomplishments. I want us to be able to gather, a logistical impossibility due to the fickle nature of chronic pain, leaving us without the ability to plan activities as we never know if today will be a good day or a bad day, with good days being relative. Once you become a chronic pain warrior, you feel a pang in your chest for the before days, when pain was not yet your constant companion, when you rolled out of bed ready to take on the world without a thought about your body parts. I know what it is to fear the light of morning, to watch friends fade away, to disappoint family members who wanted you to be somewhere for celebrations, and perhaps worst of all, to sense a whiff of dismissal or condescension from medical practitioners, that's one of the cats, whose diagnostic and treatment skills you have often waited so long to benefit from. While I have blessedly found treatment options that keep the darkest pain at bay, I know what it is to hurt so badly that the thought of taking a kitchen knife to cut out the painful spots seems nearly a sane idea at 3 a.m., when you have given up the pretense of trying to sleep as the pain continues its gouging. I know what it is to lie in bed, sheets soaked with tears and sweat, attempting to remain absolutely still, knowing that movement of any kind will set off a chain reaction of pain that rattles your teeth. I know what it is to experience nerve pain so intense that you are unable to use your arm to feed yourself, to lift your foot in a normal gait, making do with an odd kind of shuffle so as not to jolt the intensely painful spot on the top of your right foot that without any warning started screaming in pain several days ago. I know what it is to ache so badly in your muscles and joints that initial steps out of bed make you look like a toddler while feeling like a victim of torture, and how it can take up to an hour before attempting the stairs down to the kitchen where breakfast is waiting. I know what it is to beg the heavens for any kind of relief, to bargain with the devil and agree to lop minutes, hours, days off of your life if the pain could just be dialed down enough for you to think clearly. I know what it is to have stabbing, scalding pain in your pelvis, causing spasms that involuntarily bend you in half. I know what it is to plead with your nervous system to lose consciousness or your mind to dissociate so that you can live through the jolts of pain that slam through your body. I know pain. I live it every day. That is part of an essay that is in the book and was also published, previous to that, was published on a website run by complementary medicine practitioners. And I was really glad to be able to have an audience like that. And I heard from several people who read it, one of whom was a PT, who emailed me and said, Sarah, I've been at this for a long time. I've treated a lot of patients and I always wanted to do this to be helpful, but I never thought about what pain was like from a patient perspective. So right there, that was worth it to me to get that out there. So another thing, so the first thing is connecting with people. The second thing is learning something. Now, I realize that I am very biased towards learning because I am a professor, I work in education, and it's my whole deal. But I think that we can all learn some great things, and the public libraries like this one, Adams County Public Library, is doing programs like this. They've got a variety of other great things coming up. The Smithsonian is offering a ton of free virtual programming. If I happen to be retired, I think I would spend my whole day watching people at the Smithsonian talk about interesting things. The Kennedy Center right now is offering many weeks of free programming, virtual programming, that people can sign up to watch. Politics and Prose is one of my favorite bookstores. It is in DC, and they have almost every day at least one, sometimes more, authors who are presenting, and that is a wonderful way to learn new things as well. And speaking of that, learning new things, reading. I love reading. As I mentioned, books have long been my friend. I know not everybody's a reader per se, but audiobooks are a great option. And I wanted to share just a few of my favorite, most recent books. In addition to my own, of course, I have really enjoyed How to Be an Anti-Racist, and this is a book that lots and lots of people are reading right now. I highly recommend it. It handles the topic of racism in a very accessible way, and it gave me a lot to think about and a lot of action steps to work on. This is a book called She Said. These are the two journalists who broke the Harvey Weinstein story, and I've been telling everybody I know about this book as well. It is such an important read because it not only outlines important cases, but it talks about the whole power structure that allows these sorts of things to happen. And it gives us some ideas about how to break those cycles. And then this one I just finished, and I absolutely love it. Isn't that a stunning cover? The Body is Not an Apology. I love this one, Sonia Renee Taylor. And she, if you are somebody who lives with chronic illness, or you know somebody with chronic illness, or you are struggling with your body in some way, this is just such a fabulous read about how to develop a more positive relationship with your body, and I just loved it. So I'm telling everyone. So reading is great, and if you read, perhaps you could read outside. Getting outside is number 4. Getting some sunshine every day is really great for your mental health. It also helps with your vitamin D levels. And I love to wander in the garden. It never fails to calm me. And I have some pictures to show you in a little bit. I have a friend who does something called soul strolls, and she will post her pictures from her daily walk on social media, and that's fun to look at. And then my 5th suggestion is to return to what you love. And sometimes we have to spend a little time thinking about what that is. What did you love doing when you had time? What did you love doing when you were much younger? Think about what those things are and return to them. For me, I have always been very, very happy at home with my wife and my cats. It's my happy place. And the pandemic has actually been a positive for me because I get to spend a lot of time at home in my happy place. So that's been good. I also love doing crossword puzzles, especially if I do crossword puzzles while watching some sort of bad TV or something. This year, I have discovered the Hallmark holiday movies. And I know there are some people who every year watch those. This is my first year watching them, but I love doing crossword puzzles while watching these remarkably soothing movies. So I recommend those as well. Now I'm going to share my screen and show you some pictures from my garden, because that is my happy place. And Jessica, I'm just going to ask, can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Great. Okay.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure everybody could see that. Okay. So here's a picture of a zinnia that was still blooming just a couple weeks ago. This is spring in our various garden areas, and these purple things are called allium, and I love them so much. We now have purple puffballs all over the place. They remind me a little bit of Dr. Seuss. You can never have too many ceramic pots. That is my feeling. I think Susan might have a different feeling about that, but I feel like she's looking at me like, yeah, we have enough ceramic pots, Sarah. Right. But I love ceramic pots, especially in this blue color. It just makes me happy every time. And you can never have too many places to meditate. Meditation has been really helpful for me. I love the Insight Timer app. It's pretty much the only app I have on my phone, and you can do guided meditations for as short as 5 minutes during the day, and it's really helpful. Tree peonies. So this is a tree peony here at the top. I've become borderline obsessed with them, and they were particularly beautiful this year. And this is a picture of some seed packets from the Cleveland Seed Bank. When we went to visit my niece who lives in Cleveland, where she was attending college, we stopped by the public library there, such a great public library, and they have seeds that you can check out, i.e. you can take these seeds home and plant them. And we got to order some this year, and that was really a lot of fun. Sunflowers will make you smile every time. These are some sunflowers from our garden. I will admit that as a gardener, I really struggled with sunflowers quite a bit. I would buy seeds and they wouldn't sprout. I would get tiny sunflowers and they would die before they grew. I didn't know what I was doing wrong, but somehow this past year, we've been successful with sunflowers. Some pictures from summer. Peppermint Geranium here on the left, that is my favorite annual in the garden. They have fuzzy leaves. They're just so soft, and then it smells like peppermint. You can't eat it, but it's, well, I suppose you could, but you shouldn't. But it's, I just love it. So that is taking over half the garden. And then here we have fennel and phlox together, which I thought looked nice. Kitchen gardens can be everywhere. So Susan dug us a really nice garden to have that we can put our tomatoes and our squash, and here's a picture of a squash. I'll be very honest with you that our garden essentially fed the neighborhood squirrels. We got very few actual items that we could eat from the garden, but it was fun to try. And then I have a bunch of herbs in them, but I also put herbs in those many ceramic pots that I have randomly around the house. So you can put them anywhere. And then here we have black-eyed Susans on the left, because of course, if you're married to a Susan, you need to have black-eyed Susans. And then here on the right is something that Susan and I have a disagreement about. And she's laughing in the kitchen. This is a picture of Goldenrod. I firmly believe that Goldenrod is a wonderfully, beautifully textured, flowering plant that looks great in arrangements. Susan's standard line is, that's a weed where I come from. So we do disagree with that. I know that there are people who have some negative feelings about Goldenrod in terms of allergies, but there have been studies that show it's the ragweed that blooms at around the same time that's the real problem. So don't be afraid of Goldenrod. These are some pictures from fall, and we went on a little outing, socially distanced, for my birthday in September, and we met my parents at this outdoor place and picked out some fun pumpkins, and I love them, especially that we have these pumpkins with things that are still blooming. And this thing here on the left, this is a planter that is essentially a head of someone, well, not a real person, but it's a planter, and then behind what you see here, it's carved out, and that's where the dirt is, and you plant something on the top and it looks like the planter has hair. Well, I planted a sedum in it, and I thought it looked great. It had this great funky hair throughout the year, or throughout the summer, spring and summer. And then this fall, I had no idea that the sedum was going to turn this gorgeous color, and it bloomed. So I just love that picture. It makes me happy. These are some things that until very recently were still blooming: toad lily, and again, zinnia. So keeps me happy. And I wrote the word encore here because I love to get the azaleas that are encore azaleas, which means they will, and that's the name that they have, they will bloom not only in the spring, but also in the summer and again in the fall. And this little frog guy is back by our shed, and he always makes me smile as well. So I think that fall really is my favorite time in the garden. I can wander around out there even for just a couple of minutes and my mood lifts immediately. This is beautyberry here at the top, and this is the pineapple sage that just has been putting on a show of color for us this whole season. Now, one other thing other than gardening and the other things I mentioned about returning to what you love, I love s'mores. In fact, when I'm done with this program tonight, I am going to say to Susan that we are going to have some s'mores, and she keeps us well supplied with these. So she makes sure that we have all the ingredients. And I love this picture because it really highlights the differences between us. So here on the right-hand side, you have a s'more made by a scientist. It's even. There's nothing squished out really on the side. You're not going to make a mess when you eat it. This is a s'more made by a social scientist. That's all I'll say about that. And there is my website if you are interested in going to it at some point. So I'll stop sharing now so you don't have to look at that. But I am happy to answer your questions or respond to your comments. And I encourage you to put whatever you want to ask or whatever you want to say in the chat area. And if you're interested in finding me, I have a Facebook page. Facebook is the only social media that I use. I realize I should probably branch out, but that's pretty much all I can handle is one. So I have a Facebook author page. You can follow me on there. My youngest sister has a social media empire and is wonderful with all of these things. And I just try to get through the day. She keeps telling me that I need to make sure to have interesting content, etc., on my Facebook page. And I will be very honest with you and tell you that normally what you're going to get are pictures of my cats and the garden. That's usually what's there. Occasionally I put links to something where I've written something, or like I was going to do this program tonight. On my website that I shared, I have some links to, I was interviewed for several podcasts and also did several other author presentations. And if you're interested in listening to those or watching those, I have links to them on my website. So I welcome you to go there. So let me check the chat here and see if what questions you have. No questions. Okay, it's like teaching an early morning class. Right? Everyone is either that or was such a brilliant presentation that no one has any idea what to say.
Well, it was a very good presentation, yes.
They're so dazzled, they don't know what to say. Oh, well, I want to thank you, Jessica, for allowing this time for us to have this time to be together, talk about things. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. So I guess a question that I have you considered writing another book or collecting another group of essays for publication?
Yes, I have been asked about that, and yes, I would like to do that. I have an idea for a novel that I've been wanting to write, so that might be the next project. I will be honest and tell you that this semester has been very challenging. And there's not been a whole lot of writing that's been happening. So another book, it might be a while before there is another book. And it's quite the process to go about getting a book published. But yes, at some point I would definitely consider doing that, especially because I do keep hearing from people who say, thank you so much for sharing your story. and more people need to be aware of I mean, it's millions of us. Millions of us live with these kinds of chronic and painful conditions. So I don't want our voices to be lost. And still crickets from the audience. Okay, all right, well, audience, thank you for being here. Jessica, did you have any other questions or things you wanted to say?
Really, I just, again, thank you so much for agreeing to do this presentation. Anyone who would like to view the presentation again, it will be posted on our YouTube channel within a few days. And also just to take a look at all of the different programs for all different age levels that the Adams County Library System is putting together. If you visit our website, our social media, the events calendar on our website has a list of all of the different programs. Right now, everything is virtual. However, we have story times, we've got presenters that are doing various programs for all different age levels, so definitely check that out. Okay.
Great. Okay, I see here we have a comment. Thank you, Barbara, for joining us tonight, and best wishes to your mom. Well, thank you everybody for joining tonight. I appreciated your time, and it was great to be able to interact with you, even just through chat. It's always nice to know that people are out there. So thank you very much. Have a great evening. And if you have questions afterwards, feel free to email me through my website. I'm happy to chat with you.
All right, thank you everybody.